The other side of this, aside from the medical side of dealing with this experimental vaccine, is what are our rights and remedies if they're trying to make us or coerce us into taking it. And we are pleased to have with us return Speaker Brad Dacus from the Pacific Justice Institute. They specialize in religious freedom cases and in parental rights cases, but because of the coronavirus pandemic and the government response to it, including shutting down churches, they've gotten involved in that. And they sat in on a webinar they did last week. Okay, she's trying to get money, so we'll let Rachel talk because she's trying to get us money. First things first. Otherwise, I was going to have remarks on that. The Pacific Justice Institute represents its clients for free, thanks to the generous support of its donors. They have offices around the country, and if you have an issue, contact them. Their website is pacificjustice.org. There's lots of good information there as well, not only on the coronavirus situation, but also on a whole wide range of religious liberty, parental rights, and civil liberties. And this coming October, they couldn't do it last year, but they have their big fundraising gala. And this was the keynote speaker is going to be Jesse Waters, emceed by Todd Stearns, however you say that. This is going to be in Irvine, and the information is on their website. If you can support that, that would be great. If you can't step up to the gala, any help that you could provide would be much appreciated. Brad is also, you can find he's on the radio, got 711 stations. I have one station, so I'm running a little behind Brad here, but he's got 711 stations. He is on video, on live, Monday to Friday on the hischannel.com. And we got here. There are sign-up sheets around, so make sure you sign up and get on their email list. You get lots of good information to find out what's happening in terms of religious freedom and parental rights. So please sign this and turn it in to Brad up here at the front before you go. And with that, we're going to bring Brad up to the stage, and he's going to tell you what happens when the government or your employer says you have to take the vaccine.
Thank you. Should I take this one? Okay, good. Well, considering these other ones weren't so well, this is good. This will be good. Thank you. Well, you really don't have any rights as far as, the vaccine mandate. That's about all I have to. No, I'm just teasing. But no. First, I want to thank the doctors who came up. I really appreciate their opinions, and I ask a lot of questions, and I ask a lot of doctors, and I think the bottom line with regard to that is we need to continually ask questions, do research, and to get information. And that's how I'm informed about it. I was debating whether I should get a vaccine or not. Vaccine or the J&J or not. And I was doing my homework, I was doing my research, and then the decision was made for me. I got COVID. So go COVID. No. So I got that in March, and pretty nasty, I might add. You think you're doing everything healthy, and you exercise and do your intermittent fasting and your supplements and just all your thing, and then you get COVID, and then your spouse doesn't do all that stuff. She has a minor little temperature that day, a little cough, and it's gone. So. And I had it for 13 days with a fever, so go figure. First of all, let's talk. I want to talk several dimensions here. First, let me hit on the shutdowns, okay? I'm very, very positive and optimistic regarding shutdowns. I do not believe we will ever see what we went through again, ever in any of our lifetimes regarding the shutdowns. And the reason is simple. When it first happened, there were some groups, I'll remain nameless, who quickly filed lawsuits, took it up to the Supreme Court, and they asked us to participate. And we said, our chief counsel, Kevin Snyder, who's a great strategist, said, no, you're going to lose. This is going to set bad case law. Please don't file this. And they did, and it said bad case law. So we had to delay our litigation tactic for a number of months before things changed and also the new Supreme Court justice was approved. We knew then we had what it took to reverse that other opinion. We filed in federal court against Santa Clara County and Governor Gavin Newsom. The federal judge ruled against us. We appealed it to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Ninth Circuit rules against us and the 5 churches we're representing so that they can be reopened without the tyranny of Santa Clara County. And then we filed what's called an emergency injunction with the United States Supreme Court. Now, if you get a case heard by the Supreme Court, that's like throwing a Hail Mary pass and getting a touchdown. To get an emergency injunction from the Supreme Court, that's like throwing a Hail Mary pass from one stadium to several other stadiums across town. Okay? It's really hard to do, as you know, Greg. It's not an easy thing to do. We did it. It was granted in 3 days against Governor Gavin Newsom. Yes. So, as far as the shutdowns go, we have the tyrants are on the run. Cases that go up to the Supreme Court, they've made it very clear, time and time again now, that they will rule in favor of freedom and liberty when it comes to these unreasonable shutdowns, and that's fantastic. So that's good news. Good news. And also, I know it's mentioned, but I don't want to forget. If you want to get our case updates, please fill this out. How many are getting our case updates right now via email? Raise your hand high, so the people next to you can be inspired. Okay. So these are on your tables, and there's one that looks similar to that. And also, we have a resource I'm going to talk about. We've done a lot of research on the vaccine mandates. What exactly are your legal rights regarding employers, employment, churches, public places, schools, universities? To what extent do you have a defense to protect yourself? In very detail, we've had our attorneys working on this over and over again. If you want to get a copy of this, a complimentary copy, fill this out and we will send it to you. We'll email it to you or mail it to you, but fill it all out and just put at the bottom, put vaccine mandate. Just put that at the very bottom and we'll make sure you get that as well as the case updates. So in fact, if you want a copy of that, we raise your hand right now if you don't have that sign-up sheet near you. Raise your hand right now, and then the ladies, you guys can pass those to them. And if you can be sure and fill that out, because we want to get that out to you. Thank you. And then we also have these that have been passed out for our celebration of justice. If you want to sponsor a table, that would be awesome. Doctors, I know you guys can do this, all right? Because but if you want to sponsor a table, fill that out and feel free to. Now, so let's look at the scenarios regarding the mandates. Let's first talk about the mask mandates. We had a case out of New Jersey. And in New Jersey, there were 6 nurses, RNs, in a hospital, and they decided that we don't want a vaccine. But the hospital said, no, everyone has to have the vaccine, whether you like it or not. And they contacted us. And our attorney, we have 13 offices across 13 states have offices now, including New York and New Jersey. And our attorney there, who interned with us 20 years ago, she represented them, and we prevailed. And we won. So, and as far as the mask mandates go, as far as in the future, there are serious health hazards for those who have to wear a mask and they have perhaps certain respiratory issues. Also those who are athletes. Any public school requiring a student to wear a mask while they're engaged in an athletic competition, please contact us immediately. We'd love to serve you on that, okay? But so far, masks have been the fallback. Well, the government doesn't want that. They want everyone to be vaccinated. So first, what about government mandates? Can government, local governments, federal government, mandate and require anyone right now to have a vaccine, a virus vaccine? The answer is no, they cannot, because it's an emergency vaccine, as many have heard. Legally speaking, they cannot mandate it and require it. That's a fact. However, if the FDA, and this is my big concern, I've talked about this on the radio show, which, by the way, he has an awesome radio show. Definitely want to listen to his radio show. And I said that for only $20. So, no. So, but I mean it. I really do. So the government. So if the FDA though signs off on it, then technically the government can issue some kind of a mandate. The case law is actually terrible. It goes back to the early 1900s and that terrible flu epidemic that took place. And unfortunately, there's some case law on that justifying government's ability to mandate vaccinations, to mandate preventive measures and shutdowns and the like, which is the concern regarding this. That said, let's do that hypothetical. Let's say that the FDA does sign off on it, and there is this mandate, and they issue this mandate, and everyone has to get the vaccine. First off, I honestly don't think they're going to do that because politically that would be absolute suicide for the midterm election. That's my first assessment. They won't be direct. But let's say that they do it in a way that, let's say DMV won't give you your license when you go in to get it unless you have a vaccine. They'll say you have to go home. One defense that you have, and we're willing to play this card, we talk about this in our resource that I mentioned earlier, is under the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, and those who have medical conditions needing to be in deserving accommodation. That's a very clear bona fide defense that can be implemented. With regards to religious exemptions, religious convictions, the case law in the Ninth Circuit is not very good on this, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean that this Supreme Court, at the end of the day, will in fact, I believe, use the compelling state interest test when it comes to such government mandates. People say, so we look at the case law, recent case law, and say, oh, this is terrible. But what we have now in the Supreme Court is not what we had just a few years ago, thanks to the awesome work of former President Donald Trump. To me, I never thought I would say this because I was the youngest precinct chairman for Ronald Reagan in 1980 in the state of Texas. But he's been the greatest president as far as what I've actually seen, and the courts is by far the top of my list. So we have a different Supreme Court. This Supreme Court is more pro-religious freedom and respect for the free exercise clause of the First Amendment than any Supreme Court in any of our lifetimes. So I do believe that when it comes up again, I think the Supreme Court will require the compelling state interest test. And so how does that work? It would require the government to have the burden to show not just that there's a serious compelling interest regarding a vaccine, a virus, but that specifically there's a compelling state interest to require everyone or people getting services by the government to have that vaccine. And not only have to show a compelling state interest that everyone has to have it, and that's under the mandate, but also that their requirement is the most least restrictive means of furthering their interest, which is to prevent the pandemic. We already have a herd immunity or a near herd immunity. I believe we already have it based on different things that I've read. There's many people who have actually who've had no symptoms or had what's called a T-cell immunity, I guess, but I don't want to get outside my lane, so I won't do that. So I think it's going to be very difficult for them to show a compelling state interest, much less that there's a compelling for this individual or that individual to have it. In particular, also when you have the medical concerns as well can play in. So religious convictions under the free exercise clause could be played out here in those circumstances. What about employers? Let's talk about that. Right now, employers cannot require anyone to have the vaccine, per se, if they're a part of the government. If they're private sector, they technically could require it. But here's the big but. If they require it, and there is any reaction to it, that employer can be sued and personally liable for it and vulnerable under workers' comp because they required it. Now, let me give you a hypothetical. This happens in Las Vegas. There's a casino out there. I'll just say keep it general. And this, I heard there was. I've, of course, never been to Sin City myself. No. I was speaking at a church. Okay. No, but anyway, so they said to their employees, look, you don't have to have the vaccine. You don't have to have it. But if you don't have it, we want a medical test showing that it's negative every week or every other week, paid for out of your pocket. Well, what that casino really doesn't realize is that it may not be a direct mandate, but it is a functional, effective mandate because the burden is so high that they're placing upon the employees. Telling employees that if you get a vaccine, you'll get a $5,000 bonus or $500 versus someone who doesn't. That once again can be construed as an effective mandate. And so that liability is very real. We at Pacific Justice Institute, we don't mind helping you enlighten businesses that you're aware of this potential liability. Someone called me about a private Christian school, and they've got this. They're going to possibly have a mandate that all the students have to have a vaccine. They're going to be enlightened in the very near future that is not a good business move. They can have encourage it, but it's not a good business move. Also, whenever they have policies that are not protected by the establishment medical authorities like the Center for Disease Control, they're also opening them up for liabilities. Like, for example, the masks. The Center for Disease Control made it very clear that you don't have to wear a mask outside unless you're really all clumped together. I mean, to do sports and things like, you don't need a mask. When a school says we're going to require it and there's an injury, what they've done is not under the protection of medical institutions or establishment. So that could be a liability for negligence, maybe gross negligence, depending on the facts. So there's some real rights that people have in terms of employment, in terms of the schools, that can come into play. One nice thing about, I've talked to a number of people, I've heard from about that doctor, that very distinguished and respected doctor, Dr. Barbara Farrar, otherwise known as the fake doctor, because she's really not a medical doctor. I think it's sociology. I mean, how hard is it to get a PhD in sociology? Okay, never mind. I just probably offended someone out there, but we'll talk. So she's come out and just recently has pronounced that, or is going to probably pronounce that all the schools in LA County will have to have the children all wear masks, and it looks like there could be a vaccine mandate coming as well. I've talked to private schools. You know, the private schools have waiting lists. It's like unbelievable. Waiting lists. Parents are striving to find. More than 10% of the students have already bailed out of the LA Unified and the San Diego Unified School Districts. And in particular, in the African American community, in the inner cities, before the pandemic, 3.1% were homeschooled. Now it's more than 16% are homeschooled. If they come out with this kind of a mandate regarding the public schools, and I do believe that we're going to see a huge second wave leaving public schools, public education, and I just see that as a huge, gigantic silver lining. In fact, we won't call it silver; we'll call it 24-karat gold lining. But we need to look at the rights of people and what they have moving forward as we deal with these issues. So we're seeing this take place. Also, we have the mandate as applied to churches. In Oregon, we found out that's going to be, it's probably coming down from Governor Kate Brown in the next week or so is what we expect, our insiders. And so we're preparing to combat it with litigation. But if she does, it's going to require churches and synagogues not to allow anyone into their sanctuary that is not vaccinated. Needless to say, that'd be a great case. Okay. The other one is in Santa Clara County. They just can't learn their lesson. They've come out with this mandate that religious institutions, along with businesses, have to give all of their workers a sheet of paper, and on it says, I hereby certify that I've been vaccinated, not vaccinated, or declined to state. And then that has to be turned in and made available to the state for their review. I have a real problem with that. Our attorneys have a problem with that, and that's our next battle we're going to be dealing with. Airlines, that's another issue that this, I think, is very serious, could easily come into play, require a potential vaccine. Another issue we have legally are those people who have had the virus and haven't had a vaccine. People like me. There's no way I'm going to get a vaccine because I've had the virus. And people who have the vaccine after the virus are more likely to have serious ramifications, based on the studies I've read, than those who have not had the virus. It'd be stupid. That said, I'm supposed to be flown out to Israel next year to speak and all. So what am I going to do? Well, one thing that I think should be looked into is, instead of having just the virus, or excuse me, the vaccine as a methodology to escape this mandate, also be able to have something that you can show to say, I have the antibodies, I've had the test, I've had the antibodies, I should be allowed not to have the vaccine. That's another avenue for those people who, like myself, are going to be traveling and may be in that situation. And then also, I just encourage people, a question that was not raised, which I wish it was raised, is if they are going to get a vaccine, which of the three? Any? No? Okay, all right. Afterwards, tell me. 'Cause I thought the J&J. But also take note of the fact there's two companies. One's expecting to come out with a traditional COVID-19 vaccine in the third quarter, another one with a traditional vaccine in the fourth quarter. And so that's something else to be watching. If you get that, I'm sure that would meet any kind of mandate by the airlines. So do you have any questions? I'll start the billable hour. No, I'm teasing. Just teasing. By the way, I know attorneys get a bad reputation, right? I mean, we're all the time. We're jokes, we're attacked. Well, I just want to set the record straight. It's the 99% out there that give us 1% a bad reputation. Okay.
I was going to do that joke.
Okay. And I had a lot of cases I could have talked to you about, but this is the focus, so I didn't do that. So,
in finding, if you have a religious exemption, if I understand correctly, that's for employers. That's not going to get you into Costco.
Correct, but a disability, American Disabilities Act, perhaps a letter from a doctor about the antibodies. Those are some of the avenues that we look at. Some of this stuff is gray, because we never had tyranny like this before. We really haven't. I mean, if you were to tell me a year ago, or a little over a year ago, that everyone's going to be shut down, church is going to be shut down, people caught worshiping are going to be arrested, and we have a pastor we're defending who's being criminally prosecuted because he had a church service. And the San Francisco Bay Area, Contra Costa County said, this is verboten, we caught you, we're prosecuting you up to a year behind bars. That's not Canada, that's here. So there's a lot of things that we're going through that is new territory, but I promise you this, we will be fighting these. We have offices in coast to coast, Miami to Seattle, Orange County to New York City. We're going to be here and we're going to take on every one of them, make sure everyone gets the protection that they need with that charge.
In terms of the medical exemption, you need to get a doctor, and California physicians get the California Medical Board comes down on them hard if they start giving those out. So if you were looking to get a medical exemption, how would you do that? And would a doctor from Texas who is not under the auspices of the California Medical Board, would his opinion and diagnosis suffice?
Well, based on our research, our legal research, because that was something we were going to do. We were going to arrange for people to get those from doctors in other states, but the Medical Tribunal of California, it's been arranged, has said no, it has to be from California. Doesn't matter if it's right across the river or the border, it has to be from California. And I understand they have a long list of physicians that they said, it made it very difficult for people to exempt out. limiting the number of people that can get exemptions from per doctor per year, requiring specifics. They've gone after Dr. Sears and other doctors. So it's very tyrannical. The good news, and we don't have this case, but there is a class action lawsuit on behalf of those physicians. I think they have a very good case, strong case, and to allow them to maintain their oath, their Hippocratic oath to protect patients and not have non-physician bureaucrats preventing them from doing that. I think it's a very strong case.
We have an airline employee who asked, what's your suggestion for stopping a vaccine passport to travel?
The first thing that comes to my mind on that is, once again, a doctor letter putting the airline on notice that you have a disability. The American Disabilities Act kicks in, and they have to accommodate people in that situation. As was mentioned earlier by one of the other speakers, there's two aspects. There's the people wearing it to prevent it from emitting, and then people receiving it. If you have everyone else on the airplane wearing a mask, it's only reasonable that that one person who's not should be reasonably accommodated. That said, make sure you have all your ducks in a row. Work with us first, because I hear stories of people having tantrums and then being booted off or saying I refuse and my First Amendment rights, and it's not a good way to do it. So work with us. We'll be happy to. And also, things are changing. That's why we have our Zoom calls, usually every other Thursday, every third Thursday. If you want to sign up for those, go to our website, pji.org. We're bringing in experts, and we're doing a reanalysis of the law and continual updates. Things are moving so fast. Last year, I never saw case law move so fast, back and forth at such a rapid clip. So it's still going, and we're here to help you.
And we have a substitute teacher is also concerned about about a vaccine mandate. And if you have those concerns, go to their website. They're willing to talk to you and consult with you and explore what your legal rights are. And if you have a case, they will undertake to represent you for free of charge.
Right, without charge. And by the way, once again, if you're a substitute teacher, they cannot mandate you to have the vaccine because it's still an emergency vaccine.
What about, in fact, the Cal OSHA there was a hearing today that they were going to try to make employers require the unvaccinated to be masked at work as yet another try to lever you to take that vaccine. What would you think about, assuming they adopted such a rule, what would your approach to that be?
Yeah, this is a classic example of bureaucratic tyranny. They're not competent. They do not have the expertise for such a mandate. Secondly, it's also overly broad and not actually looking at the actual work environments and situations. So if you're an agricultural worker, does it make sense for you to, if you're outside, to have to wear a mask? So we could scrutinize that, which we will. They also came out initially and said that employers have to report any injury of an employee who has the vaccine, and then they came out after getting pressure and says, okay, you don't have to report it. Well, the employer is still liable for full workers' comp and other liabilities. So OSHA is very, very political, and how they just flip-flopped in a matter of days on a fundamental policy like that was ridiculous. So contact us.
This person asks about the religious exemption. Of course, you don't need a doctor to have a religious exemption, but California clamped, at least for school children, severely clamped down on that exception to having your children vaccinated. The other is just not the COVID, but the regular set of whatever 60, 70, 80 vaccines that they're giving them now. So what if someone wants to say and has a genuine religious objection to getting the vaccine?
Right.
How would that play out?
Sure. First, if it's a federal mandate, but if a federal government, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act kicks in and requires a compelling state interest. Boom. Okay, that's right there. But let's say we're dealing with a school district mandate and saying these students have to be vaccinated, period. once again, you have the ADA argument, but you also, I believe, would have a very meritorious First Amendment free exercise argument. We have a Supreme Court. People say, well, wait a minute. The Supreme Court sort of neutralized itself with the Smith test because of the Smith case. It's the worst case Scalia ever came out with. It was a terrible decision. He was a great justice. But the Smith case basically neutralized a lot of the power of the free exercise clause and the compelling state interest test. It said, so long as the rule is neutral on its face, applies to all the kids, it doesn't matter the effect it's going to have on kids' faith and religious kids if it applies to everyone. The good news is the Supreme Court, as I speak, is going to be coming down with a decision in a matter of weeks that may very well overturn the Smith case and bring back the old Sherbert v. Verner case, which would require a compelling state interest of any government action that in any way creates a substantial burden upon people in the practice of their faith, including students attending school, having religious objection. There's so much moving so fast right now. Pray for the Supreme Court over the next few weeks. There's some other very important cases as well. And also please pray for us because we've got a lot of cases we're doing as well. So that's sort of what we're looking at. Things are very fluid. But the answer is short, yes, I do believe that will, looking forward, not present, but looking forward, I do see that as having a bona fide defense.
You see on the, as you says, with the medical information, a lot of stuff gets posted on the internet, and even if it's not from the government, it's not necessarily correct. So you see things like, well, I've got this card, and that entitles me to not wear a mask, or things like that. Oh,
the stuff on the internet where you buy a certificate, they don't spend a lot of money on that, folks, because I don't think that's going to work. It may work initially, but that the bureaucrats will educate their people that this is not legitimate. I don't think that's going to work. It's like that, pay $100 for a PhD in whatever. It's sort of along that same category. I would not put any weight into that. So yeah, any others?
One of the things we saw in with this so-called pandemic or scamdemic was just wouldn't even necessarily being elected. It could just be a health bureaucrat. Suddenly you never heard of these guys before. All of a sudden they got practically absolute power to rule by decree. And I know that, I don't know if you were involved in it, the case on challenging Gavin Newsom, which got overturned on appeal, basically saying, yes, the governor can say I have an emergency and I can now rule by decree.
Yeah, and that's originally the Supreme Court, the earlier case that we didn't want going to the Supreme Court, they upheld the Johnson rule, which says we the courts give great deference to governors in these times of trauma and emergency circumstances, basically putting the Constitution on the shelf. Then when Amy Coney Barrett came in, the court shifted and they said, no, the Constitution's never on the shelf. They have to justify it. They can't just say there's a trauma. Where are the stats specifically justifying this specific regulation and restriction? We use this to equip a lot of business owners with one of our resources to empower them on how to challenge those kind of situations. Also, the contrast between elected versus non-elected. I want to make this quick story. There was a church in Walnut, California, Southern California. They had a freedom celebration outside, all outside. They invited me. I was one of the keynote speakers. It was great. And I noticed there were 3 sheriff cars with 5 deputy sheriffs right there on the premises. You know why they were there? They were there to protect the event from thugs and other people who might come and Antifa and whatever, okay? Well, there was someone else from the government who showed up. And this was a public health officer. And he wanted to enter the premises. And I told the pastor, I said, no. You tell him if he wants to enter to participate in the event, he's welcome to. But if it's not to participate, does not have permission and consent. And so he waited there for about 3 hours because he's getting paid, government wage. I'm sorry. Anyway, he's probably got overtime. He just waited. And then he left and he levied a $500 fine against the church. We, Pacific Justice, paid the fine and we're representing the church. Ironically, though, the sheriffs were there to defend and protect our freedoms, and that bureaucrat was there, who was not elected, was there to be tyrannical. At the same time, the same day, there was a radical leftist rally taking place in LA County, well advertised, no public health officer. So it's tyrannical, it's biased, and that's one reason why we need to support offices that are elected by we the people, like law enforcement, and do everything we can to fight public health officers and their abuse of power. We had a skating rink they wouldn't let open up. So you know, we advised a skating rink, this is up in Northern California. I said, you know what? It's Christian owned. I says, how about having a rolling praise rink? And he goes, what are you talking about? I says, yeah, make it a recommended contribution for people attending. Every hour, have a 5-minute break with someone preaching and doing praise music. Do this and this, and recommend a donation on the food. I says, and you're now, and reincorporate with the nonprofit C3. We did that. Boom, they were up and running, and the public health officer couldn't do a thing about it. So if you're in a situation and you don't see any way out, contact us, because we like to do our job and to help. We helped countless numbers of private schools open up months earlier, and it was a real joy to do that. And also, one point I want to make too is, you notice we had different doctors with different perspectives. One great thing about conservatives is we're for freedom, and we actually are the most tolerant people in America today. Because people say, what are you advocating? I said, I'm advocating freedom and choice. And I was on an epic news interview before I came here, and I told them, I said, in the interview, and I don't know what station they're on, so maybe they won't air it. So, but anyway, they at the Epic Times, that was the interview. And I told them, I said, you know, the left has been so quick to use the word choice and freedom and right to our body, except when it comes to something that is medically a real threat. And then they throw their language out the window. The reality is, conservatives, we are the ones who are for freedom, liberty, and choice. And we need to be advocates for the individuals to be able to make those choices as they see fit. Please, if you can, is there any more questions? Or?
I do have one last question here.
Okay, go ahead. I was getting my grand finale.
Before we get to the last question.
Yes.
You've come here multiple times, and you've never charged us anything for coming out here. We very much appreciate that, and you've always had great presentations and useful information.
Thank you. It's always a joy. It's a privilege.
Please accept this check to PJI for $500 to help support your good work.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much.
The final question of the night is this, and it's not for the lawyers, it's not for the politicians, it's not for the government. It's for all of us. Probably one of the most disturbing things of the last year is how readily so many people were willing to give up their rights and freedom if the government said the word disease.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a really keen observation. I see people in my neighborhood wearing a mask while they're jogging in a residential community. That I think is something we can't ignore, because what I'm concerned about, and my wife and I have talked about this, is whether or not a large mass of society has been programmed. Not over 21 days, which is how long it takes usually to program someone into a habit, but for a whole year, with fear as the foundation, and hate as the weapon. I believe we need to call it out, and we need to do everything we can to lovingly and respectfully convince and lead these individuals away from that kind of tyranny for the sake of our children. The government has just done something that was unthinkable just a little over a year ago. If we stand firm, and I believe their eyes are opened up, which is the first step for real change. If we now act upon these convictions and don't take it lightly, I believe we will see change. I also believe we're going to see, I predict, the midterm election, the House and the Senate flip, and in 2024, the presidency flip, because of that conviction. So I'm actually very optimistic. I think we're going to see a 1980 in 2024. And because people are so resolute to the atrocities and the violation of our freedom and rights, there's a reaction to that, and I think we're going to see it. But we have to be faithful. And you guys keep up what you're doing. If we can ever serve you in any way, please give me a call. And I want to give a deep appreciation to all of you guys who do fill this out, because I really want to keep you updated. It means a lot to me personally. So God bless you all, and thank you again, and thank you for your support.
Thank you, Brad.